Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10, the NFL football podcast over here on Clueless Gamers. As always, I'm your host, Pete, joined by my co-host, Brian. Brian, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing good.
That's good to hear. We are here. The last time we checked in with you guys as the audience, we did it on a late Sunday night. We recapped pretty much all of week 5, except we previewed the Indy-Baltimore game on Monday night, which ended up being a pretty fantastic game where Lamar kind of went off there in the second half. They had a rough first half going, and then he puts up over 400 yards and wins it in overtime. It was absolutely spectacular. It also meant a little bit more to the two of us because we were playing each other in fantasy that week, and you had Hollywood Brown, and you came back and beat me by zero point 0.8 points. So I'm still bitter about it, Brian. I really am.
I understand that because that game just seemed to have so many wacky implications. I was in another league where I had a huge lead, and Lamar Jackson's performance on my opponent's team ended up doing me in, and I lost by point 0.2. So, I mean, it was just
Wow.
crazy all the way around. But the league that you're referencing, that is my only win of the season.
I
So to
know.
say it's been a struggle is an understatement. So I'm just glad I got that one out of the way, and hopefully can manage to scrounge together a couple more wins as the season goes along.
Yeah, that I'm not gonna lie, that loss hurt. That was a big deal, and watching Hollywood Brown as soon as he has no points in the first half, and then turn it around the way he does, scores 33 and a half in the second half in overtime. I knew, Bry, that as soon as he got to overtime and they missed that kick in Indianapolis when Blankenship missed the kick, I said the Ravens are going to get the ball, they're going to score a touchdown, and it's going to be Hollywood Brown. I just knew it. I knew it was going that way that night, and that's literally exactly what happened. I was looking down at my phone, waiting to listen to it happening because I didn't even want to watch it with my own eyes. That's exactly what happened. But yeah, an incredible game. We can't talk about it too much in depth. I'm sure we'll talk about Lamar's exploits as we go on here further in the show because we have an exciting Week 6 matchup between them and the Chargers this past weekend that we'll definitely dive into. But guys, we're going to switch over to Week 6 of the NFL season. It kicked off on Thursday night with the Bucs-Eagles. We saw the Bucs kind of handily win it. I know the score maybe made it look closer than it was, but I was really kind of the Bucs took their foot off the gas. There was a London game, what we talked about beforehand, where the Dolphins and the Jags. The Jags end up getting their first victory in about 21 games or so, dating back to last season. They had 20 straight losses, and we were talking about just before we went on the kick was incredible that ends up winning it, where it looks like he's clearly going to miss it. It's about 5 feet to the right, and it somehow curves in miraculously. It was one of the craziest kicks I've ever seen.
It absolutely was. I mean, watching it on TV, you usually can tell when the ball immediately when it's kicked in the trajectory going toward the post, whether it's going to be good or not. And that one was so far off to the right that it was just like there's no way this is going to be good, and somehow just to curve back in and barely squeeze inside the upright. That was the one that tied it actually, and then they wind
Yeah.
up winning with another kick later. But yeah, just a very bizarre game, one that was hard to call because Jacksonville, as you mentioned, came in on the 20-game losing streak. So I think, both had Miami in this game,
Yeah.
and Jacksonville finally gets off the schneid.
Yeah, it was. Those London games are always weird. They're usually 9:30 in the morning. They're usually about a lot of teams that are down on their luck and kind of need the publicity a little bit, and so they go over there. I remember when the St. Louis Rams, when they were over there, they went year after year after year just because the team was a downtrodden franchise, and that's kind of the case these days. Obviously with the Jags, but man, Miami, a team that we were not high on going into the season. I think we were pretty accurate in calling that when you don't have the QB situation solved, and then you have a guy that we don't really believe in that much, in the two of us, in Tua Tagovailoa, and he gets hurt and misses 3 games this season. You need a quarterback to win this league, and Miami's they're in a lot of trouble for the future. I see why they so hardly went after Deshaun Watson. I mean, we're seeing it before our eyes right now.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a very disappointing start of the season. Even if we didn't think Miami would be playoff caliber, I think a lot of people would have expected at least a competitive team this year. And so for them to only have one win and talking about in the mix for being number one pick of the draft and the futures of Brian Flores and the quarterback in question, there's just a lot going on there that makes you wonder the direction of that franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do like Brian Flores. I like what was built there. But you know what? That offensive line has been worse than I expected. And the QB position, as we touched on, and then wide receivers have been banged up, and they're not that dynamic at running back. It's been a rough go putting all that pressure on that defense on that side of the ball. And we've seen it play out here through the first 6 weeks. When we went over to the Sunday games, and we started at 1 o'clock, there was a game here that we both agreed that we kind of wanted to highlight a little bit, and that was Kansas City went into Washington. And at first, if you didn't watch this game and you look at the box score and you go, all right, Chiefs, they got back off the schneid, they're 3-3, they won 31-13, I might take a little bit more of the pessimistic route here than you, which is usually customary for this show. And I still don't love, Bri, what I am seeing from the Chiefs. I know they're 3-3. I know, they're pulling out, okay, a victory against a team that they should beat, but they still had several more turnovers in this game. They still took a long time to get going here in the second half. And the bottom line is Washington has just not played like the team that you and I think, thought that they would be coming into the season, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. They've been lackluster. So getting a victory here is what you're supposed to do as Kansas City. And in my opinion, when you do it as kind of sloppy as it looks, the box score is a little bit of a lie in this game. When you do it as sloppy as it actually was when you were watching the game, it's still alarming for me. Now, are they going to be there at the end? Are they going to be a playoff team? I definitely think so. But in terms of being these upper echelon teams, especially in the AFC, the Baltimores, or maybe even your Chargers, even though we'll get to them from this past week, or your Buffaloes, I just don't see them in that category right now. I mean, what do you say?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, we talked about it in depth on the last show, coming off that really eye-opening performance against the Bills, where their offense looked completely out of sync. It looked like it was playing at a level that we've never before seen in a bad way. I mean, they just did not look crisp at all, and the Bills just took it to them in Kansas City. But I have a little bit more of an optimistic outlook on them because, look, we know this team is going to score a ton of points, and yes, they don't look nearly as crisp, and the turnovers are clearly a problem. I mean, they're turning it over multiple times a game. Yeah, and Mahomes has already surpassed his interception total from last year, which is staggering considering we're only in the middle of October. But the fact that they came back and had a big second half, I think gives me a little bit more optimism because the way this game was going, it looked like it could be a loss the way that first half was playing out. And had they lost, I think I would have been a lot more feeling how you are about them, but being that they kind of turned it back in the second half, opened up the offense, hit some explosive plays there with Mahomes in the passing game, I think that kind of changed the narrative a little bit. And to me, the problems for the Chiefs come defensively, because even though they held Washington to 13 points, they were giving up way too many big plays. Oh, yeah. And their offense, yes, is going to score a lot of points, but I have a feeling they're going to play a lot of shootouts. So, I mean, the expectations for them are to be Super Bowl caliber, and right now you'd have to say they're at least a cut below that.
Yeah, and I know people are going to point to, well, Pete, Bri, they shut out Washington in the second half. It's Washington and Taylor Heineke. The bottom line is your defense, if you're a Chiefs fan out there, or you're a admirer of the game of football and how great this offense has been in the last few years, on defense, they're giving up over 7 yards per play. I mean, it's inconceivable a number when you look at something like that, when you watch them on film and on NFL Sundays. It's nowhere near good enough. And when you're giving up that many yards, okay, well, now your defense needs to be a little bit more opportunistic, and they're not. They don't really take the ball away at all. And they're ranking in the bottom half of the league in terms of turnover differential. And when your offense gives the ball away another 3 times, Mahomes had a fumble that they ended up recovering. It's just not good enough. I mean, we even talked about beforehand that one of those picks he threw where it's a muffed snap and he's just trying to do too much. And as he's getting tackled, he just throws it in the air 5 yards ahead and it gets picked off. A guy like Mahomes, the caliber he is, the years he's been in the league now, you can't be making a decision like that. And all I could think is he's doing something like that because he's pressing, because he knows how historically bad his defense is on pace to be. And for me, it's not a recipe to go deep into the postseason.
What it reminds me a little bit of is the Saints teams going back years where they had some very prolific offenses and had some great runs in the playoffs, had the one Super Bowl there with Breeze, but then that defense started to really decay and Breeze was put under a lot more pressure and he could always put up points, but we saw some historically bad defenses. Remember when Rob Ryan was the coordinator and they were just giving up tons of big plays, and that's kind of what I'm seeing with the Chiefs is it's putting so much more pressure on Mahomes, and that's why we're seeing more turnovers than we ever had before in his career.
Yeah, and when you're about a little over the 5-minute mark in the third quarter and you're losing 13-10 to Washington, I'm not entirely sold on what's going on in Kansas City. Great job to get the win. I'm going to give them credit where credit's due, but in terms of measuring up with the rest of the conference, I'm still not loving it. They have to cut out these turnovers considerably. Like, it needs to stop. Otherwise, it could really cost them even a playoff spot if they keep rolling the way they are. Going over just briefly to touch on the Rams-Giants game. The LA Rams went into MetLife, and the only reason I'm really touching on this game is not even because the Rams are my team. It's because I was at this game. It was the first time I went to a game in about 2 seasons, about 2 years. COVID obviously had a lot to do with that. And this was as uncompetitive game as I've ever seen in person in my life. Being around the Giants fans, we got there early, we tailgated, we hung out, and going in there and seeing in the parking lot into the stadium at least a 35 to 40% ratio in terms of Rams fans. There was a considerable amount of Rams fans at the game, which I think tells, one, this team has been gaining some popularity around the country, whether it be bandwagoning or not. And then, two, it also speaks to a lot of these Giants fans are just not showing up to games because of how horrible this franchise has been. Really, honestly, if you want to look at the last decade, you don't even have to say this year. It's just been not great. Decisions have been made at the top there with the Mara family. And then you go into the game, and to see the way Giants fans were reacting in the stands, understandably, to see and talk to some of them and know that they have no hope of what is going on. They are questioning the decisions that Joe Judge and company are making on the field. And in the third quarter, when the Rams go up, I think it was about 31-3 at that point, to see the mass exodus that I've never seen in person in my life before of so many home team fans leaving at the exact same time to the point where the stadium was barren in the middle of the third quarter was insane to me to watch. So happy my team got the win, but man, if you went there, as some of my friends went there to watch something of a competitive game, don't really have a stake between either team, you definitely didn't get it in this game, I'll tell you that.
This was one where I didn't really have to focus too closely. It was more of a red zone kind of period because, well, there were so many blowouts on Sunday. I mean, that's
so many.
One thing that stands out. Like last time we were on breaking down the Week 5 action, how many great finishes there were. Not the same case last week, but look, I mean, the Rams just took it to them. I mean, what can you say? The Giants, we know they have a lot of issues, and I know there's a lot of injury related, and people are saying, well, maybe if they had the receivers and Saquon Barkley and the left tackle Andrew Thomas, maybe things would be different. The bottom line is the Giants are a lost franchise right now. That's all there is to it. They're not a stable franchise, and like you said, it starts with the ownership on down. I don't know where they go from here. It just looks like a team that's completely in the abyss. And when you're facing a team like the Rams, that quite frankly is one of the better teams in the league right now, as you should know, maybe you don't admit, but that's to me where they are. I mean, Stafford just handled them easily. What was it, 4 touchdown passes? Cooper Kupp. What can you say about that? I want you to elaborate on Cooper Kupp because this has just been an incredible season, and I'm just loving it from a fantasy
Oh yeah.
perspective. But he has just been the go-to guy for Stafford, and I mean, I think they're a pretty complete team. They're not flawless, no team is, but even in a tough division, I really think your team can make some noise this year.
Yeah, the biggest knock, honestly, on the Rams right now is they start way too slow. They need to get that offense going. They scored no points in the first quarter. The Giants are up 3-0. Really, honestly, if the Toney injury doesn't happen, Kadarius Toney for the Giants, I think they end up scoring a touchdown there, and then who knows where the game could go. They need to be able to start fast against the better teams in this league. It's okay to do it against the Giants. It's not okay to do it, let's say, against the Arizona Cardinals, and you've seen how that played out. So they need to fix that. That's their biggest issue right now, in my opinion, for that team going forward. But yeah, Stafford was good. He had a lot of short field going on. Daniel Jones and the offense for the Giants, honestly, 4 turnovers. It should have been 5 on the first play of the game. He fumbles and the Giants fall on it. They were just giving us short fields. They were giving the Rams short fields, and it really wasn't a competitive game in the slightest. And then you add on top of that, the Giants come in with injuries. They get more injuries during the game, as you referenced. Andrew Thomas, the left tackle, ends up going out of the game as well. And, what can you say about Cooper Kupp? I mean, has there been some talk of, hey, are you distributing it enough between him and Robert? You look at the targets. Cooper gets 12 in this game for 9 catches. Robert gets 5 targets, only has 2 catches. But these guys, I think they all really are a collective group, man, that love each other. And I know that's a cliche a lot of times in sports, but, man, you see it the way these guys talk about each other in the press conferences. And, Cooper and Robert, they've been there together all this time. They've seen what it takes to win. They've seen success. They've seen failure. And Cooper, he's just on another level. I mean, he makes catches that are just so underrated when even Stafford is not putting the ball exactly where it needs to be. He's scooping it out of the air. We saw that on the 1 touchdown catch he had here where he had to kind of turn around. The ball was behind him, picks it, grabs it, turns around, and runs into the pylon for a touchdown. You had last week in Seattle on the Thursday night game, it was that ball that got bounced up in the air. He's able to track it, locate it, and make the catch for a key first down on 3rd down. So he's on another level right now what this guy is doing. And coming out of Eastern Washington, me telling people like you, like, keep an eye out for this guy wherever he gets drafted. He leads all of collegiate history in terms of receiving yards. This guy can make an impact. And the fact that he went in the 3rd round, that's where he ended up falling to, where the Rams kind of snagged him, you have to think about now, man, teams were really not doing their due diligence on scouting this guy when he came out of college.
No question. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the 1 touchdown that you were describing where he made the tough catch and turned to the pylon, that was on a 4th down, if I recall, right?
Yeah, it was an incredible catch. It was a great play. Yeah, there was. It's just his ability to have the soft hands, to be able to locate and know where the marker is, or know how to move his body so he doesn't absorb the big hit. Those little nuances in his game is what makes him, honestly, at this point, you can't argue that he's a top 5 receiver in the NFL right now. What he is doing this season, I don't think there's any question that you have to put him in your top 5. If you're sitting down and you're listing those guys, he's got to be in there.
And the thing is, too, is it's not just little 5, 7, 10-yard dump-offs that he's catching. Like, he can get deep in the middle of the field and make plays on the run and turn into really big plays, too.
Oh, absolutely. He has sneaky speed. Like, there is definitely deception on in terms of what he actually can do. It's just something else. And yeah, I'm rewatching the clip now. It was on 1st down, that touchdown that I was referencing. But it was late in the 4th quarter. It's when we ended up scoring the 38, and that's where they took Stafford out and they put in John Wolford, which is throwbacks of last year of what was going on. But the questions I have to wrap up this game also is, the Giants, who knows where they're going? Those are questions we could talk about later on as we go into this season. But more so, Joe Judge. You're talking about, I don't know if you saw the press conference after the game. You're talking about submarines. You're talking about leaving Daniel Jones coming off a really bad hit in Dallas. He's coming off, going in the concussion protocol. And you're leaving him in for the entire game when the game is clearly out of reach just so he could get hit over and over and over. I just thought that was really poor decision-making on the part of the head coach of the New York Giants.
I would have to agree. A very questionable decision. And the thing with Joe Judge is he appealed to the Giants with his interview and with his introductory press conference. Because if you watch that, which I did, his first press conference, he was a guy who just looked like he was going to mean business and was meant to be a really good head coach. Said all the right things, just absolutely looked the part. But one point that's been made about him, which I have to agree with, is it just seems like it's too much of a throwback, where the Giants would be set up to be better if this were, say, 10 years ago, where they could run the football, have this kind of rough and tough kind of team. That's not what's winning in the NFL these days. And those aren't the kind of head coaches that are winning these days. So I just think the Giants are kind of lost in the past here, and Joe Judge is probably not going to last. Let's face it, with the way the results are going for them as the losses continue to pile up. The next head coach is going to be in probably within the next couple of years. Let's just face facts. And as that happens, the Giants just become, to me, more and more unstable. When you keep recycling head coaches, that's when you know there's just no direction with a franchise, and that's where the Giants are right now.
Yeah, the Giants, technically right now, since 2017, have the worst record in terms of win-loss percentage in the NFL. The Jets are technically one game better, but that's only because you guys had the bye this week, so you played one less game. And the Jags are a game above the two New York franchises. So the two teams that play out of MetLife, the two worst teams in the NFL statistically in the last 4+ years now. And to me, in closing on the Giants, Dave Gettleman, the GM, has to go first. He's got to go first. He's had way too long of a leash. His drafting has left a lot to be desired, and I'm getting rid of him before I get rid of Joe Judge any day. But, yeah, Joe Judge not looking too good right now. There's definitely some questions about his coaching decisions going forward. Going over to another coach that's on the hot seat there in Chicago, and Matt Nagy. The Packers went in there, won 24-14. And really the only thing I wanted to highlight in this game is, the Packers, they're still winning. They're not winning it in fantastic fashion. But we have to talk about the little soundbite that everyone in the world that's in this kind of industry of talking about NFL football, Aaron Rodgers getting the double bird, getting some obscenities thrown at him from Bears fans there in the front row. When he rushed in for that touchdown to make it 24, when they scored the 24th point, and to say, I own you, I still own you. I love that. I thought it was great. It's true. I mean, Green Bay has now won 19 of the last 22 games against Chicago, so there's no debating that he owns the Chicago Bears. But what'd you make of him saying that? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Where do you land on it?
I probably would lean more towards loving it than hating it. I mean, these are the kind of things that, like you said, you get on First Take and all the talk shows that I don't as much get into, but I kind of like it, I would say, for Rodgers. It's good for sports to kind of have some of that, and let's face it, as you pointed out, he does own them. And with that kind of record, we've seen some just great performances by Rodgers against the Bears. One comes to mind, I think it was on Christmas night in Green Bay. He just shredded them for like 5 or 6 touchdowns. There was the NFC title game in Chicago back when Jay Cutler was the quarterback.
The old bike Jay Cutler game. Remember the bike on the sidelines?
Yes, yeah, and Cutler wound up getting hurt, and Caleb Haney came in, if you recall, in that game, and the Packers wound up winning. So he's had a lot of great moments. against the Bears. And I think Bear fans have to acknowledge what it is. I mean, that with the obscene hand gestures, I think they do. And so I think it was kind of a good comeback there from Rodgers.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Green Bay hosts Washington this weekend, while Chicago has to play good old Tampa Bay. You know, they played a great game against them last year, but in terms of if you're a Chicago Bear fan, you don't have a ton of hope right now. Let's go over to, I think, a more impactful game, Bri, to talk about here in Week 6. And that's the LA Chargers, riding high, talk of the league, everyone loving them. Justin Herbert listed as everyone's, early season MVP, and they go into Baltimore. And Baltimore, let's just be honest about it. Let's not mince words, Bri. They trounced them. I mean, they owned them. It wasn't even close. And to win 34-6, I think the Baltimore Ravens reminded the NFL, reminded the AFC in particular, hey, we're still here, and we could still, for lack of a better word, we can still kick your ass. Like, you need to recognize us, recognize our run game, recognize what we can do with Lamar and how dynamic he is. And I thought that was an absolute statement game, and also a game that will greatly impact playoff seeding come December, January.
Yeah, I mean, look, coming into the year, I picked the Ravens to win that division when there were a lot of folks high on Cleveland. I guess you still had some picking the Steelers, but I picked the Ravens in the division. Now, in this game, I actually went against them, which doesn't look so good now, but I just thought it was going to be a game where Herbert and the offense continued to get things going like they have this year, and I certainly expected a close game. And so, yeah, for it to be the trouncing that it was, as certainly a letdown for Herbert and the Chargers. And I agree with you. I really think the Ravens made a statement. They showed that they are upper echelon on the AFC side with any other team that you want to mention. A couple things from this game. I don't know if you saw, because you were at a game there in the 1 o'clock window, but the Chargers made a decision when this game was still in the balance of going for it on a 4th down from their own 19-yard line, which was just inexplicable. Now, I know teams are going for it on 4th down more than ever before. It's just crazy how many 4th downs. Yeah. But to go for it, and at that point, they were down at that point probably 2 or 3 scores. I don't know exactly what the score was. I get it, you have trust in your offense, and you love Herbert, but from your own 19-yard line, that's taking it a little bit too far.
Yeah, I saw it later on. This is Brandon Staley has preached, he's all about analytics and about trusting Justin Herbert, and we've seen him make a lot of calls so far this season where he goes for it on 4th downs, 4th and 4, then becomes, 4th and 9, and he's still going for it. We saw that a few weeks ago. And you saw it in this game as well, and ended up backfiring, which is something that's going to happen. But I think the Ravens' run game is, because you have to remember, Lamar wasn't really that dynamic in this game. He controlled the clock. He did a great job, but they had 2 interceptions. They had 2 fumbles that they could have easily lost. Lamar was still getting sacked. It's not like the game wasn't there for the taking. It's just that the offense in particular was absolutely dominated by the Ravens. It doesn't help when you're missing field goals as you're the Chargers there. That's not going to help anyone in any case. And, I wonder when it comes down to it, like, we get into these modes where we see this young, great quarterback and we go, he's the next MVP. He's the next star of the league. And it's like, Herbert is great. He's definitely going to be great, but he's still learning. He's still in his only 2nd year, and we need to pump the brakes sometimes on our expectations, because when you play the other upper echelon teams in this league that have been doing it a lot longer than you have, there's a reason that the Ravens tied the rushing record for the most 100-yard rush games in a row. It's because they know who they are, and they do it better than anyone else in the entire league. You could argue in the entire history of the NFL, they were tied for the record with the 70 Steelers. And when you have no answer to stop that run game, when Devontae Freeman is carrying balls for a touchdown, Lamar is obviously running as he does, Murray is running for touchdowns, Le'Veon Bell, remember that guy?
Yep.
He's running for touchdowns. When you're pulling people off the street and you can insert them into this running scheme, and the Chargers don't come in, they don't prepare enough, or they just frankly, can't stop it, you're going to lose football games, bro. You're not going to beat a team like the Ravens if you can't stop the run.
Yeah, well, I was going to make the same point about the running backs and picking guys up off the street. That only works for a team like the Ravens when you have like a winning culture in
Yeah.
place. Like a team like the Jets can't go scoop up veteran running
No.
backs and have them produce. It's just not going to work. But the Ravens have the scheme in place, they have the coaching staff in place, and that's why it works. And they've been ravaged by injuries at the running back position really all over the place. Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle's out for the season, but they overcome it. And I really think John Harbaugh doesn't get enough credit for how good of a coach he is. And Lamar Jackson's only getting better each year. He's getting better as a passer. We know what he can do with his legs. The Ravens are dangerous, and they are year in and year out, so it shouldn't be any surprise.
Yeah, remember, no Mark Ingram here anymore. J.K. Dobbins lost for the season. All these pieces that they've lost. And, hey, Mark Andrews, if you haven't paid attention, if you've been under a rock, this guy's becoming one of the elite tight ends, if not the elite tight end in the NFL. You need to keep an eye on him. And one last point. When you take a team like the Chargers and you take out what I think is their most important weapon is not Justin Herbert, it's Austin Eckler. When he goes 6 carries for 7 yards and he catches, another 4 catches for under 50 yards, when you could contain him and do that, you got to give props to that Ravens defense because that's how you beat the Chargers is you contain that man.
Right, and they've had big games from the wide receivers too, like Mike Williams. He was kind of silenced in this game. Keenan Allen too. So, yeah, I agree. Keeping Eckler under wraps as they did, that clearly was the game plan going in, was to not allow him to explode, and they did a good job and wind up with a blowout win.
And going forward in the final games here of October, remember Lamar has never lost in the month of October, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Going over to another lopsided victory that I think is important to talk about as we go into Cleveland, and Arizona blows the door off of Cleveland. They win 37-14. And this game could have even been, honestly, Bri, a lot worse because, Cleveland got that Peoples-Jones, Hail Mary touchdown, which is always great to see Hail Marys. But they got that at the end of the first half. You think they have some momentum, they have some hope going into the locker room, and then they come out, get shut out, give up 14 points to Arizona, and in Arizona, where I think, honestly, if you watch the game, they played well. I think they could even play better than that, but coming in with no head coach, no QB coach who are out with COVID issues right now, and to do this in Cleveland against a supposed, team, albeit, banged up, I understand that in Cleveland, I thought was incredibly impressive. And to me, there's no way you can't say the Arizona Cardinals through 6 weeks are not the best team in football.
Yeah, I mean, this was quite a performance. I picked the Browns going in, so that did not go well. And if you just turn to the Browns side of things for a moment, and you talk about the issues there, for them to have a quick turnaround, and they're playing in the game tomorrow night against Denver, doing so without Baker Mayfield, as we find out just today with the shoulder injury, and down the top 2 running backs with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So that's going to be a tall order, even in a home game against a Broncos team that's been struggling in their own right. But yeah, I heard the same thing. It's not like I was really watching every play this game, but I heard one of the analysts say Arizona scored 37 points in this game. It could have easily been 50. So that about says all you need to know. And Kyler Murray just continues to shred opposing defenses, showing why right now he's, if not the favorite, maybe him and Dak Prescott is the top 2 for MVP as things stand right now. So Arizona is just clicking on all cylinders, and it's just been impressive to watch.
Yeah, they've been insanely impressive. They don't have some of their top pass rushers, like a Chandler Jones doesn't play in this game as well. And guys like J.J. Watt, I mean, not that we didn't know how amazing J.J. Watt was. It's not that was, he's probably a Hall of Famer. We understand that. But to see him have this resurgence and know the guy that he is and what a good guy he is, what he did for the city of Houston when they went through all those tragedies, and particularly the hurricane, to see him now having fun, it looks like again, which, I mean, who wouldn't? You're not playing for the Houston Texans. But to see him enjoy it, to see a new life be brought back into his game, almost like he has his, like, 7-8 years ago speed almost when he's making pass rushing moves. It seems like he's actually incredibly healthy now. It's a joy to see. And yeah, the Cardinals had some issue with, like, they're snapping the ball to Murray. I don't know if you saw, there was a couple, like, muffed snaps, high snaps, low snaps. I don't know what was going on there, but I think they could have easily scored probably about 50 points if they really wanted to. And in Cleveland, yeah, the issue is injuries. They've had defensive issues all year, especially with injuries. The offensive line, both tackles have been banged up now, both running backs, as you say. Mayfield is not playing this week. It's not looking good for Cleveland right now. And
No.
I don't know where you stand. I'm still not a big fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they're still there. They're still hanging around 3-3. I think Cincinnati has impressed incredibly, probably a lot more than people thought, including myself. I think they've been very impressive. And then, as we just touched on, we know what Baltimore is. They can find themselves looking at a last place finish here if they don't get some things together and get a little bit healthy. So going into Thursday night, as we'll talk about, this game is incredibly, incredibly important. But for me, Arizona, who's stopping them right now? I mean, they just know what to do, and when they want something, they need a defensive stop, they can get it. They need a sack, they can get it. They need a Kyler Murray great play, they can get it. They need to run the ball, they can do it. Anything they want to do based on the given situation during the game, they can do it, and there is no one stopping them right now.
And I'm interested to see, too, after the trade that they made to bring in Zach Ertz from the Eagles, how he kind of fits into the offense. They've had some success with veterans coming in, like you mentioned with J.J. Watt and A.J. Green, another veteran. While a lot of teams are going with younger players at most positions, Arizona's got some veterans that are getting the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. And given the injury that happened to Max Williams, it makes sense that they went out and got Ertz. And it'll be nice to see him be on a winning franchise again. Albeit, against my Rams, so that will hurt in our division kind of race going there. But it's been fun to watch what's going on in the desert, man. The team's been incredibly impressive. Going over to New England and talking about a game that was just weird, Bri. The Cowboys go in there, they win 35-29 in overtime. But, if you look at the box score of this game, if you weren't watching it, and I watched it, as I was, driving home from the game, and then, when I got home, you look at the box score and it doesn't make any sense. I mean,
yeah,
New England gets owned in every statistical category. Everything. Mm-hmm. Dallas did better than them. They rushed it a tiny bit better than them. They way more passed yards, over 200 more yards than New England did. Outgained them in total yards, beat them in average, yards per play. It just doesn't make any sense how, and they destroyed them in time of possession, and yet they still had to go to overtime for this game where Dallas seemed to be trying to find ways to blow this game at the end. I mean, what was your take on the outcome that happened up there in New England?
Yeah, well, at one point, referencing the yardage total, the Cowboys were outgaining the Patriots at one point by over 200 yards, and the game was about tied. Yeah. So the big key to that happening was the Cowboys had two different possessions where they were in the red zone and turned the ball over. One was on a tip ball in the end zone that got intercepted, and another, the Cowboys were going in for a touchdown. They were on the goal line, and Dak fumbles it trying to sneak into the end zone. So both of those plays took potential points off the board, and I think that was a big reason why the Patriots were able to keep it as close. But then you get to the ending sequence and the crazy swings of momentum, starting with it started first with the Zuerlein missed field goal from 51 yards. Then the Patriots get the ball back, and you think they're going to run out the clock. Instead, Mac Jones throws a pick six to Trevon Diggs, who, what a year he's had, 7 interceptions already, and I think 2 pick sixes. So then you think the Cowboys are in great shape. Well, I think it's the next play when Mac Jones bombs one to Kendrick Bourne for an 80-plus yard touchdown, and at that point, the game is just like a complete bonanza. And then, of course, the Cowboys kick the game-tying field goal, go to overtime. Dallas gets the ball, and Dak on that rollout to C.D. Lamb for the walk-off touchdown. Just an amazing game from C.D. Lamb, who had 2 touchdowns,
Yeah, breakout
nearly
game.
150 yards. Yeah, breakout game. And Dak had the most passing yards against a Bill Belichick team in his coaching career with the 445 yards.
Yeah.
So what a performance from Dak, and what has just been a string of them. And what a win for the Cowboys, because that's a game in years past that they absolutely lose. You know, they don't
100%.
overcome that Mac Jones touchdown pass and the mistakes that they made on the goal line. But for them to win, to me, shows you this is a different Cowboy team. And that was another game that shows this past week.
Yeah, a couple things to pick out from there. Prescott did have the most yards against a Belichick team, but remember, it was also overtime, so technically the record in regulation is, I think, a couple times. Kurt Warner did it as well. So there's a couple things in there, but he had the most, including overtime. Trayvon Diggs, what can you say about that guy? Amazing. He's a ball hawk. However, he could leave a little bit to be desired in terms of pass coverage. He's by no means a shutdown corner at this point in his career. And to go back to that Kendrick Bourne touchdown, he kind of bites on a double move up there with Kendrick Bourne. And then I think it was Uzamoa, the safety, comes over. I don't know what the hell he was doing on that angle that he took on the ball where I don't know if he's trying to get an interception himself. He's trying to make a big hit. It was one of the worst angles I've ever seen in my life. And that ends up leading to I believe it was like something like 76 yards or something like that from Kendrick Bourne. The momentum swings, as you said, were absolutely insane. But also, I have to talk about the reason why the Patriots were able to stay in this game was the Cowboys' 12 penalties. I mean, over 100 yards in that. That was bad. And we saw that at the end of the game, they're driving. They're down by 3. They're trying to get Zerline to kick the field goal to tie it in regulation. And they get a huge couple penalties where they end up having a 3rd and 25. And Dak does a fantastic job of getting the ball to CD for 24 of the 25 yards, which set up the kick. I mean, that saved the game right there, on top of right before that, there was a 4th and 5. They had to go for it. And that amazing passing catch he had to Cedric Wilson over on the left sideline. So those 2 plays saved the game for the Cowboys. And where, a Cowboys team would have definitely lost this in the past. They did not play by any stretch of their imagination their best game, and they're able to come out with a victory. So impressive. I think they're definitely one of the teams to watch in the NFC. And as we go forward in terms of New England, I know they're competitive in some games, but it's getting ugly, Bri, compared to what we're used to up for a Bill Belichick team. It ain't looking fantastic right now.
Well, that's the thing with the Patriots is for so many years we were conditioned to just see their game going and say, oh, yeah, the Patriots are going to win that game. And that's just not where it's at anymore. I mean, they're a team that's like any other team, where they're in the middle of the road. They're capable on their best day of beating teams, but they're also capable of losing. And it's kind of different to look at them that way, but I think that's what you have to accept as a football fan, that this team is just not even close to where they were in years past.
Yeah, it's weird to see, and to me, to watch a Bill Belichick team give up a 3rd and 25, give up 24 of those yards in a game-saving, game-on-the-line play. It's just not what I've come to expect, so that was something to see. The final game that I wanted to talk about, which, I remember you saying that you didn't watch a lot of this game because you were at work, was the Monday night game. Buffalo went into Tennessee, another rematch of last year. What a game this was. I don't know if you caught any of the highlights there. I know you saw the end of the game, but a fantastic back and forth game that really picked up there in the second quarter. There was defensive moments. There was great offense. It was awesome to watch. And in a game where, Tannehill for Tennessee wasn't that impressive, but it's all right. You lean on that guy called King Henry. He could rush for 76, yard touchdowns and 74, whatever it was, and pull things off like that, given 7.2 a clip on terms of carries. You can lean on a guy like that. And the Bills actually, customarily, in years past, have held Derrick Henry under 100 yards. They did not do that on this night. They were kind of ripped up there in the run game, and it was just a back and forth game that came down to the last moments, and I know you saw this, where the Bills are driving the field, and I saw different opinions on this online and on TV, and it's 34-31 Tennessee. The Bills have it. It's 4th and 1. They're inside about the 3-4 yard line, and instead of kicking the field goal to send it to overtime, they go for a QB sneak with Josh Allen, and they're stopped. I mean, to me, I just didn't agree with the call. And I know there's going to be some people out there, and they said it on the Monday night broadcast. Oh, I love the call. I think it's a great call. It was just even a better play by Tennessee there. I don't necessarily agree with that. Okay, you want to go for it, fine. But that play call that Brian Daboll ran down there as a QB sneak, I'm sorry. I think that's a horrible call. I think it's a really bad call. You've seen earlier in the game, Josh Allen ran a similar play on a 3rd down point where he was trying to get 1 yard and he was stuffed. Why? When you've seen already that Tennessee was bound to stop that, when you're inside the goal line, so they got their biggest, most athletic players on the defensive line, particularly at the defensive tackle, they're in because they're in for a goal line set because they know you're going to try to run the ball, probably with Josh Allen. And to do that again, I don't care that he slipped a little bit or whatever happened. Even if he didn't, he was not going to get enough push given that the plays that were made on the Tennessee side of the ball and how they kind of just crashed right through the offensive tackles and guards for Buffalo. I did not like the play call at all. And if that's the call you're going to make, kick the ball and let's go to overtime where you're at least going to have somewhat of a shot. I mean, where'd you kind of come down on that final sequence over there in Tennessee?
You know, I wonder, and this may be controversial too, but with the weapons that they have on offense and with how well Allen throws the ball, I'd be tempted to throw a pass in that spot. And yeah, I just think, you know, with Diggs and with the guys they have on offense, Emmanuel Sanders, even if you spread them out and you run a quarterback draw with Allen, I think that's a more effective play than trying to get that half yard on a quarterback sneak when you got all the linemen right in on you like that. So I don't. You think I'm crazy if you call pass in that situation?
No, not at all. I was thinking the same thing. You got an athletic quarterback. Roll Josh Allen out to his right, run about 2 or 3 routes on a little bit of a post route to the pylon, and try to throw in an easy touchdown. I mean, for God's sakes, run a play action there. Anything would have been better than doing a basic QB sneak with no one. You know, it's not like they were even, it was a design QB run where you have some blockers ahead of you. Especially when it was stopped earlier in the game, in this same game on the same sequence, and you saw it didn't work then. I don't know why you would go back to the well with the game on the line there. I just thought, in a game where Brian Daboll called a lot of great plays and this Buffalo offense was efficient once again, when it counted the most, I didn't like that call. Yes, it's one play, it's one game. The Bills are a great team. This was a great performance from Tennessee, but you have a chance to go 5-1. You have a chance to be the top seed there in the AFC, and now you drop back and Baltimore takes that spot. These games can prove to be crucial down the stretch, and I didn't like taking a creative, athletic quarterback and turning him into some basic QB sneak runner. I don't care he's 6'5". It doesn't work in this situation.
Right, and how many quarterbacks do we see that are successful on quarterback sneaks consistently outside of Tom Brady, who seems to get him,
Exactly.
90+% of the time? Outside of him, the quarterback sneak is not a play that works for just about any other team.
No. It was just a play that I just did not necessarily agree with. And I get if you want to be, get up for your team and you don't want to play for overtime, you don't want to take that risk, you want to show confidence in your guys, fine. But let's call a better play there on 4th and 1 and not run that QB sneak. But hey, that's just me. It was a great, entertaining game. Another amazing primetime game this season. I don't know if there has been a crappy primetime game, Brian. You could correct me if I'm wrong. In this entire season so far, every game has been freaking entertaining.
Yeah, there really has been even like Sunday night where the matchup didn't look like it was going to be too
Yeah.
appealing with the Geno Smith-led Seahawks team against the Steelers, and the game's 17-0, and you think it's over. Seattle winds up rallying and need overtime before the Steelers get a sack by T.J. Watt to force a turnover that sets up the game-winning
Incredible.
field goal. So even that game turned out to be entertaining. So yeah, lot of great football this
Yeah,
year for
hey, if
sure.
you're an NFL fan right now, and I would imagine you are because you're listening to this podcast, you are having one of probably the best starts to an NFL season you've ever seen in your life through 6 weeks. It's been great. Bri, real quick, because I know we're limited on time, before we go over to some picks, which we'll just run through really quickly, and we'll talk about it next week. Maybe on Sunday again. We'll see how it works out. I wanted to kind of get your take on first the Urban Meyer stuff, because we have not talked about it on this show. And then I feel like it'd be remiss to not talk about what happened over there in Las Vegas with Jon Gruden. First, with the Urban Meyer stuff, did you see any of the video? Did you see what was going on in controversy? And if you did, kind of what was your take on what's going down there in Jacksonville?
Well, yeah, I mean, it just seems like there's a lack of leadership there. I mean, to me, the bigger factor was when the story came out about him not being on the team flight. Like
Weird, right?
that was, yeah, very strange. And I didn't actually watch the video. I mean, I heard about it. I know what it was all
Yeah,
about.
it's
And
something.
yeah, and I mean, the Urban Meyer to me was not set up for a successful run in the NFL. I think he would have been better served, and it may not have been possible, but for him to go to a team that had a better team in place than to go to a team like Jacksonville where you knew it was going to be a while. See, he builds college programs. I don't think he can build an NFL franchise. So I just think he would have been better served going somewhere else. I don't think it's going to work in Jacksonville. I think he's going to be out the door, within a couple of years. But Jacksonville, I guess, now is feeling a little bit better about themselves coming off their one win that they get in
Yeah.
London. Overall, though, it to me just demonstrates a lack of leadership, and the owners come out and made statements saying we need better leadership, basically, and that had everyone thinking maybe he was already on the hot seat. So a lot of turmoil, to say the least, going on down
Yeah,
there.
there was a lot of rumors swirling around that he was going to be fired right after that he wanted to be fired so he could take the USC job. I've come down on it, and I think you have as well, is that I'll take it even a step further. I think Urban Meyer just does not work in the NFL. I think he's a college level coach. That's what he does. That is totally okay. He's great at what he does there, even though outside of Utah, I could argue how many programs has he really built from the ground up. There was some players in place there in Florida. He definitely walked into a favorable situation there in Ohio State. But I still think he's a great college coach. I just don't think, especially establishing a culture on the NFL level, which is something you kind of mentioned, I don't think he's necessarily right for that. And to do what he did was, yes, of course, it was despicable. He's only apologizing because he got caught on camera, which I don't see how he didn't think he would, because everyone in this day and age has their own cell phone with a camera that they can immediately upload to the internet. So I really don't know what was going through his head to go to that bar that he owns, to go in an area around Columbus that he is extremely popular and obviously well known, but to not, I've never heard that in my life, especially after a loss, but even after a win, you're in the middle of the NFL season and you don't fly with your team, you leave them as the head coach. I thought that was a really poor judgment decision on the part of him. And then he compounds that with, hey, you're a married man. You're a man that, you're supposed to be of faith and all that crap you preach. And, you don't prove that when you're watching some of those videos and seeing a little bit of those photos. Wasn't a great look in Jacksonville, and I just think ultimately, because of the next guy we're going to talk about, the controversy with him kind of died down, but I just don't think he's going to end up working in Jacksonville. The other one, and the crazier story, probably the more important story, is Jon Gruden, resigned. You could argue that he was basically forced to resign. He was fired there in Las Vegas. In the middle of his 10-year contract. If you don't know, if you're listening to this for the first time, There's an investigation going on with the Washington football team because they had a very toxic and disgusting environment in terms of what they created over there, with a lot of sexual allegations and stuff like that have happened. So the NFL was digging into everything that has been happening in that organization in the last 10 or plus years or so of what was going on, dating back to all the way when Bruce Allen was Washington's team president. And that then forced some emails to be found of Jon Gruden over a period of about 7+ years, sending some just outright abhorrent, disgusting emails to Bruce Allen and other people of his thoughts on things that were going on in the NFL, stemming from when the lockout was happening in 2011 until about 2018 or so. A lot of that, he was on the broadcast for ESPN in Monday Night Football. He said a lot of unfortunate, let's just say, obscenities and terms that are just, we either don't use or are just downright wrong in today's day and age, and how to characterize people of homosexuality, of race, of things. He took shots at Roger Goodell. He said a very racist thing over to DeMaurice Smith, which is ends up leading the player association. He's the president there, which his term is coming to an end as well. And it was just a shocking revelation. One that you never like to see, because you never want to believe that people you've watched all these years on TV as a personality and as a coach have these dark of demons kind of in their closet, and they are these type of people. But all that to say, I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad that he lost his job. He deserved to, and honestly, wouldn't be surprised if he didn't work in anything ever again. I don't think he'll definitely ever work in the NFL ever again. I mean, what was kind of your take on all of that happened in Las Vegas?
Yeah, well, it all came together pretty quickly too, and I think when the news broke, it really created a groundswell, because I don't think we necessarily expected it that soon. And as you mentioned, it was on while a Monday night game was in progress, and it was at halftime, right, when Adam Schefter was talking about the story. Ironic too, because of Jon Gruden's past employment with ESPN, where we watched him on the Monday Night Football broadcast for years, and I have to admit, I mean, I found him entertaining on the Monday night broadcast. I think now lately the broadcast had not been as interesting to listen to, and him when he was with Mike Tirico and Jaws there, Ron Jaworski, I thought it was a good listen. So it really is just unfortunate that things come out like that. And I mean, it's obvious to say that the NFL did what they had to do, for Jon Gruden to lose his job, and there's no defending what he did. There's nobody who could say anything in defense there. So that, to me, though, aside from all that, like, to give a head coach a 10-year contract, regardless of who he is. I mean, Bill Belichick doesn't get a 10-year contract. So why should Jon Gruden, who was out of the league for a long time coaching, yes, he had a successful run years ago, but when I heard that he signed a 10-year deal, I just thought that was completely nuts, as did a lot of people at the time. And then you find out that all this is going on behind the scenes. If you're the Raiders, you just say good riddance. I think a lot of them would have said good riddance anyway, but now they just have to move in a different direction. They got themselves a win in Denver that I don't think anybody had been getting last week.
Very impressive.
Yeah. So with everything going on around that franchise, to go in and get a road win and a hostile environment, that says a lot for the Raiders, and maybe they'll hang in there in the mix this season. But for Jon Gruden, I agree with you. I think he's done in the NFL and doesn't deserve to have another chance.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like, I think the 10-year contract has a lot to do with his relationship with the owner, Mark Davis, and how much really the two of them love each other. And apparently they had a big meeting on that Monday of what was going on. There was tears shed and all that stuff. But I think they tried to keep him after the Smith comments. That's why he coached on that Sunday when they lost to the Bears. And then when all that new information came out on Monday, there was not only any way you can keep him in terms of a publicity PR standpoint, but in terms of a morality standpoint, of leading this team, being a leader of men, and being a good person. when you read into in the New York Times article, if you want to check it out, we're not going to talk about every single detail here on this podcast. We don't have time right now. But if you look into some of these emails that he said, it's just things that are completely unacceptable. Not only as a leader of a multi-billion-dollar franchise, but as a man, as a person, to say those kind of things when you're supposed to be in a leadership role, when you're supposed to be just a stand-up guy. And it's just it was disappointing and shocking and all of those adjectives that you could throw out there. And you move forward as a franchise as the Raiders. They got to figure out where they're going after this season, where they're going in the middle of this season right now. And given all that, the way Derek Carr and that team played, I thought was hats off to those guys. It was insanely impressive.
Yeah, and just one last thing I want to mention in regards to the Gruden situation. I don't know if you heard the comments from the Chargers head coach Brandon Staley
Yes.
on the matter, but he just had a great 2 minutes there that if you haven't seen it, I would urge anyone to check it out because just, not even talking about anything football related, just about what it means to be a head coach and to be called a leader. I just thought he summed it up brilliantly. And I didn't even know that Staley is a cancer survivor in his past. So he's been through a lot and just has great perspective on things. And I just thought that was a really good couple minutes he gave in a press conference, and really would encourage anyone to check out what he had to say.
No, I would absolutely agree. It was well said, and maybe I'll link that down below. If not, you could search that on YouTube. Brandon Staley's had a couple great sound bites already so far this year. In Week 6, the Jets, Falcons, Niners, and Saints were on a bye. So if you're just joining us and you're wondering why we didn't talk about your team or so, that is why. Brian, we're gonna just run through Week 7 picks here since we have to finish up here. So starting tomorrow night, given what we said about all the Browns injuries, Denver goes into Cleveland, and they're up against it. 2-3-3 teams that are kind of reeling right now after hot starts to the season. Who you picking in this game, Bri? Where are you going?
Browns have all sorts of issues. Not having Baker Mayfield, Case Keenum's going to get the start at quarterback. They don't have either of their running backs. I see the Browns are favored in this game. I think it's got to be more of a pick'em. Denver has been struggling, but I think they're going to squeeze out a win here. I'll take them by a field goal.
I am also going to take Denver. I think it's going to be a very close game. I wouldn't be surprised if this Browns defense could kind of stand up and pull it home there in the dog pound. But for right now, I got to take the Denver Broncos. The 1 o'clock games start on Sunday with the Carolina Panthers going to MetLife, those poor Giants fans. Again, Giants, very struggling team. Panthers start off 3-0. They have looked abhorrent in their last two games.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam Darnold has looked horrible. All that being said, I'm still taking the Panthers because until I see some life from the New York Giants, I can't pick them week in and week out.
Exactly. I mean, the Giants are just at a point right now where you have no confidence in picking them. So I'm going Carolina. Sam Darnold struggles and all. At one point in the last game, I saw Darnold was 8 of 22 passing.
Yeah, it was horrible.
So he has got to find a way to be more accurate than that. I think they'll find a way to beat the Giants.
Yeah, Matt Rule also called him out this week and saying that he has to be better. Your New York Jets go up to Foxborough. They go play New England. Two kind of record-wise teams and play-wise teams have not been particularly fantastic. I think the Patriots have had more impressive performances, even in losses. And with that being said, I think that there's the better coach team. I think the Jets win against the Titans was kind of like one of those classic Jets wins every year. They pull it off. They did it against my Rams last year when they were a winless team. But I don't see them beating New England in New England, so I'm going to take the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm going Patriots for the simple fact of how Bill Belichick fares against rookie quarterbacks. Him against Zach Wilson, I just think is going to end up being a mismatch, and the Patriots take it.
Is he going to see ghosts in this game like Sam Darnold did many years ago?
I hope it wouldn't be that bad of a performance, but I certainly don't see him lighting it up.
Well, that, and also you remember we seen these teams earlier this year, and we kind of seen how that broke down as well. So. Yeah, I'm expecting more of the same. A really potentially good game, and Kansas City goes into Tennessee. And this is a game that means a lot, especially, I would argue, more to KC record-wise. Like, they need to keep pace in that division. But the Titans, I think, they're hard to predict some weeks because one week they could beat any team in the NFL, and then the next week they're losing games to the Jets just because they didn't show up and weren't sound in fundamentals. Right now, though, I just can't pick the Chiefs because of the turnovers and because particularly that defense has just been so bad, and now you have Derrick Henry and company. You're playing in their stadium. To me, if this game's an Arrowhead, I'm probably taking the Chiefs, but for the moment, I'm taking the Tennessee Titans to win this.
Well, that would be something if the Titans could pull off back-to-back wins against Buffalo and Kansas City. I don't see it. I think the Chiefs got their offense back going in the second half of that game last weekend in Washington, and I think Mahomes and company will roll on Sunday. Give me the Chiefs.
I hope this is a great game, though. I really don't want to see a blowout. Washington goes into Green Bay. I don't think there's a lot to say here. I think Green Bay is not fired on all cylinders, but right now, Washington and Ron Rivera, they're a lost team right now. Their defense has been the most disappointing unit you could maybe say in the entire NFL. They are giving up the most points in the entire league. 31 points per game is the worst, 32nd in the NFL. And I think Green Bay, at home especially, they're gonna throw all over the yard on Washington. So give me the Packers.
Yeah, if the Packers are right and they're the team that we think they are that can be a real contender in a loaded NFC, they win this game by 20 plus points. If they win this game by a touchdown, to me it shows you they're not really as good as we think they are, but I think they will roll. I'd like to see somebody beside Devontae Adams in that receiving core get some production. It seems like it's a lot of Adams, a lot of Aaron Jones out of the backfield. They need to find somebody else in that passing game for Rodgers, but I'm going Green Bay.
I 100% agree on that. Atlanta goes down to Miami, two really bad teams. You know, we talked about Miami earlier in this. You know, what's going on there? Why can't they really get it right when they seem to be in the past couple of years making such significant progress? And Atlanta is not a great team, but they still have a decent offense. And with that, with coming off the bye, preparing an extra week, I think Atlanta's going to go down to Miami and they're going to pull this one off.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, before the season started, if you looked at this game, you probably would have favored Miami, but the way things have gone there, you just don't have a lot of confidence. They're kind of in the same category as the Giants, where you need to see them do it before you can pick them. So I'm going Atlanta on the road.
Cincinnati goes into Baltimore. I think this is going to be a pretty fun matchup. I hope so. I mean, I thought that last week with Chargers-Ravens, and we saw how that went. But right now, the Bengals, they're an upstart team. They're playing well. I love it, but they're no Baltimore. And so Lamar at home, undefeated in October. Give me the Ravens.
Yeah, I think this game will be closer than their game against the Chargers because Cincinnati is playing well. And if they were to come out with a win here, you talk about a statement. That would be a big time. That would prove that the Bengals in this division can stand up with the big boys. I think it's going to be a pretty close game, but I'm giving the edge to the Ravens at home.
Lamar's never lost to the Bengals, 5-0. We could title this the Jared Goff revenge game. The Lions go into SoFi Stadium at 4:05.
Oh, boy.
Winless, which we know the Rams are, as I mentioned earlier, are subject to maybe losing to a team that doesn't have a win. What's going to happen there? Two former quarterbacks, two number one overall picks facing each other. Back in could I think it's a little far to say maybe the house that Jared Goff built, but this could be the Jared Goff revenge game here, and I think this is a trap game that the Rams need to pay attention to. I'm picking LA, but the Lions, besides last week, have played really well besides last week, and now Dan Campbell calling out Jared Goff last week after the game. He's going to be amped up to really show it to McVay. This game's going to be a little closer than you think, but give me the Rams still to win at home.
Oh, boy. I mean, I know the Lions have been competitive in some games, and you always like to temper your expectations for the Rams. I think you like to play a little reverse psychology there. I'm telling you, the Rams are a 15-point favorite in this game. That's not enough. I could legitimately see this game being 40-0. I think they are going to romp the Lions on Sunday. I do not think it's going to be even close.
I could see it maybe being more of a 10-point swing or so, but I guess we'll see what happens. Eagles going to Las Vegas. Las Vegas, an impressive victory there. Eagles have kind of won some games or been around in some games that you wouldn't think they would. We saw that in week 1 in Atlanta. They pulled out that win against Carolina. They made it look a little bit closer than it was in Tampa Bay. But I still think if I have Derek Carr as my quarterback, I'm going to expect him to be able to pull it out, and I'm going to take the Raiders.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way and take
Really?
Philly. I think the Raiders had their big kind of an emotional win for them with everything going on around the team. I think now they're due for a little step back. We thought in a home game against the Bears that they would handle them, and they kind of laid an egg. Eagles, as you point out, have had their moments on the road. I see them getting a road win here.
Houston goes into Arizona. I don't think there's a lot to talk about here, barring that all of Arizona somehow gets COVID. I don't think the Texans are going to offer much of a fight here, so I'm taking the Cardinals.
There were some enormous spreads this week. I referenced the Rams over the Lions. Arizona, 17.5 points. Just an astronomical number, but yeah, it's Cardinals.
The final 425 game is the Bears going to Raymond James Stadium to go play the Bucs. Remember, this is a matchup last year on primetime where the Bears were able to pull out a 2019 victory, as the famous Brady didn't know what down game it was. However, I still think he's going to, quote-unquote, if you could even say that at 44 years old at this point, Brady will get a little bit of a revenge against the Bucs playing at home, and I think they should comfortably beat the Bears.
I could see the game being a little bit closer just because the Bears, every once in a while with that defense, can kind of stymie some offenses. And they played pretty well against Green Bay in the first half there last week. So I'm going to take the Bucs. I think it'll be a little closer than you think.
The Sunday night game is Indianapolis goes into San Francisco, and maybe on paper before the season this was supposed to be a little bit more of a high-profile matchup. However, I still think this is an important game for both teams because the Niners dealing with, as they always are, all these injuries. We've seen the Colts be banged up, even though Carson Wentz has really actually played really well in the last few games or so. But San Francisco, supposedly Garoppolo is going to start after he has the calf injury. It looks like Trey Lance is not going to be available with the knee issue that he suffered against Arizona. We're not really sure exactly on that being maybe a game-time decision. But I'm picking the Colts to go in there and not collapse the way they did in Baltimore, and I think they're going to pull this out against San Fran.
I am in agreement with you. The Colts have really played a lot better. Now, last week we know it was against a bad team there with Houston, but the way they played against Baltimore, I think, showed that they were on the improvement. Wentz playing a lot better. They got T.Y. Hilton back last week. I think he wound up exiting the game with another injury, so I'm not sure what his status is, but having him back just changes everything for that passing game. I think they're playing with some confidence right now, and the 49ers, you don't know what to make of them week to week, so I'm going with you and taking the Colts.
The Monday night game, the final game, is the Saints play the Seahawks. Again, maybe this was billed as a higher, more profile game going into the season. But Geno Smith supposedly is going to be starting again in Seattle. I know there was some rumors there that maybe they were kicking the tires on Cam Newton over in Seattle, but we know we're not getting Russell back until at the earliest week 10 as he recovers from surgery on his finger. And these are two teams where Seattle's 2-4, but I think they've played some interesting games. And then the Saints are so flippy-floppy, maybe the most flippy-floppy team in the entire league. However, I think they're going to be able to go up to Seattle where, this is a crazy thing to say, Brian, the Seahawks have not won a game in Seattle this year. So I'm continuing that trend, and I think Seattle's going to end up losing this, and the Saints are going to pull it out.
That really is crazy when you think about it. Another game that's hard to figure. I feel like both the primetime games, Sunday and Monday night, are just, it could kind of go either way. You don't really know what to make of a lot of those teams there. I just go back to, I don't have a lot of trust in Geno Smith. So watching him play for the Jets as long as I did, I just don't have a lot of confidence in picking Geno Smith on a winning side. So for that reason, give me Jameis Winston and company on the road.
Remember, Seattle, though, to argue the other point, 11-2 on Monday Night Football under Pete Carroll. It's the best win-loss in the NFL since 2010. So, hey, if you're picking Seattle, maybe that's something you think about. Teams on the bye this week: Steelers, Bills, Chargers, Jags, Vikings, and Cowboys is the first big batch of teams all on the bye. Brian, we got to get out of here. It was great having you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and look forward to another really good week of football. Boy, this season just goes so. We're already at week
I know.
7.
It's
I feel like the
crazy.
NFL season goes faster than just about any other. So it's flying by, but it's been, as we talked about, highly entertaining.
Highly entertaining, and that makes more content for us to talk about here on First and 10, guys. If you listened to the end, thank you so much for listening up until this point. It's greatly appreciated. If you can like the video, subscribe channel, share with your friends if you'd be so kind, that'd be fantastic. As always, timestamps for all the things we talked about are down below in the description, so if you want to bounce around and check it out and see what we said maybe about your favorite team, we won't take that personally. We understand everyone's strapped for time. Maybe put us on in the car as you're going to work. We would greatly appreciate it. We'll be back in a few days to talk about Week 7 as we wrap it up. But until next time, thanks for watching.